365 Sports. This 5 o'clock hour starts with Andrew Monaco, voice of the Aggies, who joins us on the show today to open up this last hour. Andrew, is it really your fourth year? Has it been that long?
Yeah. I'm going into year 5, and there were a lot of people in the pool didn't think I'd make it into my second year. So I'm feeling kind of fortunate right now.
Well, that's great. I mean, congratulations, and I know that it's a great time to be doing that, any time to be doing that. I know there's the question about the quarterback, and that's obviously a big deal. When do you think that Jimbo Fisher, if at all, will name a starting quarterback?
I think it's going to be before game week, before Sam Houston week. I think you want to have your number one prepare for that week and go up against an opponent. So that gives you it gives Jimbo about a week and a half, right, of camp before you transfer from camp attitude to game week attitude. And that's what he kind of did last year with Haynes King and Zach Calzada. Now, look, Jimbo over the course of this camp, Haynes will run with the ones on one day, and the next day it's Max Johnson who runs with the ones. And it's going to be that competition, but I really don't think it's going to last until the season. I wouldn't think so. It could, but I think Jimbo likes having a number one and then knowing who the backup is and going into, once you get into that game, as opposed to continuing this battle for number one. And he's big on, it's not so much someone loses that battle. He's really big on who's going to win that battle. And as he says, he's going to choose some of it, but he knows that his team will choose the number one quarterback as well.
Andrew, top 10 ranking in pretty much any poll you look at for A&M. There's some people that will argue for or against, just like with multiple other teams throughout the polls. But does this have the sense to you of a top 10 team in the making early on?
Yeah, it does, especially watching them in camp. They are deeper and more talented in every position than since Jimbo's been here, which, there were a couple of years you're holding your breath if a linebacker had gotten hurt because you weren't sure who was going to come off the bench and play that role and be in that starting role. But I mean, it's interesting because they weren't content with 8-4 because Jimbo said even before the year, look, if you beat Alabama and if you say that you're going to go 11-1 and you beat Alabama, you tell me who we're going to lose to. And will that make you happy? And that was his point about not finishing last year. That was the disappointment. But what that win over Alabama did was really catapult them and this recruiting class. And now that recruiting class and all that momentum is now on campus and on the field. Look, there's a lot of questions. There's always a question. I don't care what team you are. Questions have to be answered. But one question that I think has been answered in this camp is, are these new freshmen in their first camp, are they ready to compete? You better believe it. I think that leads to that excitement, and I think it's a fair ranking coming into this season.
Yeah, it's hard for the guys coming in from high school to play on the defensive or offensive line because it's just the physicality of it. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. But I have seen a lot of chatter, as expected, with Evan Stewart. Is that correct, the wide receiver?
Yes. Yeah. Does not look like a freshman. It's funny. My partner, Dave Elmendorf, a couple years ago, I said the same thing to him about Damani Richardson, who came back and is the starting safety for the Aggies. I said, if you did not look at the roster, you would never know that Damani was a freshman. I feel the same way for Evan Stewart. Guys, and I'm serious about this. Evan Stewart, at the beginning of camp, I thought, you know what? They're all going to get their reps by going in numerical order. Well, as we continue through camp, Evan Stewart is still the first wide receiver in a drill. And you guys know that if you mess that up, it makes for a miserable period. I give him a lot of credit for doing that because it's a lot of responsibility being that first guy in a drill. That tells me that he knows the playbook. He knows what he has to do, and he's got that, obviously the athleticism. Now he's got to combine that with knowing the playbook and the technical aspect. But it sure seems like these quarterbacks have thrown to him for a while, and he looks like he's going to be the real deal.
Andrew, some big contributors that are gone off of last year's team, looking at Isaiah Spiller, looking at Jalen Weidermeyer. How do you see I know they're talented at running back, they're talented all over, but kind of how do you see this I guess, evolving without the likes of familiar faces such as those two?
Yeah, I certainly hope that, those players will leave their mark on this team by who is next. And for Isaiah, he shared those carries with Devon A-Chain. Look, Devon's ready.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to be fantastic. And again, they're deeper there. Amari Daniels, L.J. Johnson, Ernest Crownover, Le'Veon Moss, who signed. But it'll be Devon A-Chain. And you'll see Devon in a number of different places on the field. 6 will be on the field probably every snap, certainly every kickoff. I have no idea if teams will kick to him. Tight end is interesting. It's very deep, but the only tight end who has taken a snap in the SEC is Max Wright, the tight end out of Katy. But very excited about Donovan Green out of Dickinson. Blake Smith has been hurt back from a knee injury. Same with Fernando Garza. And then Max Johnson's brother, Jake Johnson, big 6'5" tight end. He is, also taking those snaps, and Jimbo doing something that he did when he was at Florida State. Go get an international flavor. They've got the Swede and Theo Mellon. He is here as well. So they have depth there, but they've not taken an SEC snap, and you guys know that's going to be the difference. But if you want size as a tight end, they remind me a lot of Jace Sternberger, who was here before, and that's the type of tight end. And I can see why 6 of them committed at Texas A&M. Jimbo knows how to use that tight end. It's a great place to be a tight end in college football.
In fact, Max Wright, tough guy. He need defensive end. Wasn't he on the defensive side of the football? Yeah.
And I'll never forget the touchdown pass in South Carolina as he's running down the sideline. It was all his former defensive linemen running down the sideline. They celebrated with him first. So I think he moves from that second blocking tight end into more of a catching tight end. And you guys know it takes a little bit of time to get your body from a defensive lineman's body to now that tight end body, and he certainly looks more like a tight end than he has in the past.
If everything is equal at quarterback, and we know Haynes King, we covered him in high school at Longview, and I know last year he got hurt very early. But if everything is equal with the transfer, Johnson from LSU, among the others now on the roster, who would you go through if they all were about the same?
Haynes King has been coached by Jimbo Fisher, and I mean that seriously. He saw Kellen Mond get coached by Jimbo. He's been coached by Jimbo. Max Johnson, though, has had the most SEC experience, but it's a brand-new playbook. This is the interesting thing about the quarterback room. A coach's son and a quarterback's son. Mm-hmm. And then you have Connor Wigman as well, who is talented, but really has to learn both of those things. I wonder if the experience of Haynes being here at A&M gives him a little bit of a boost, a little bit more forward for that. And then Haynes, I don't want to say dual threat because he throws the ball better than people think. And I was really impressed last year when he was hurt. He was on the field as much as possible and working with Zach Calzada and just was around. Even when he wasn't allowed, he was he was in a truck looking over the fence. He's just that involved. But I think it says something for Max to come to a team like this. The good news is he doesn't have to go up against his defense on a Saturday. He does against Monday through Friday. But I just wonder if because Haynes has been here longer and is a little more familiar, if that is what will give him a little bit of an edge.
Andrew, are they ranked as high as they are because they beat Alabama despite their overall record unranked? Are they ranked as high as they are because of who they have coming back, or because of what they've had coming in with all the last couple of years in classes?
Combination of all of those. The Alabama win with Zach Calzada at quarterback, whether Nick Saban says it was a rebuilding year or not, it's still a win over Alabama, which Jimbo and the Aggies had not been able to do. I think that number one ranking, which I know took people by surprise, but they should not have been because Jimbo's been in the top 5 since he's been at Texas A&M, but he's had the number one recruiting classes at Florida State. It worked out pretty well for him with the Seminoles. I think it's a little bit of everything, and I truly believe it is they have game breakers, and I think that's what was missing. I think when you can put the ball in the hands of Devon A-Chain, whether it's a handoff, a kickoff, if you can get the ball in the hands of Aniyah Smith on a pass or an option or a punt, those guys can change the game if the ball is in their hands. And I'm not sure the Aggies have had that. And that's why there's so much excitement about Evan Marshall. And then the defense coming back. The question is, how do they react to DJ Durkin, who's really not going to change a lot from Mike Elko. And DJ Durkin knows how to defend against the SEC, not just at Ole Miss, but with Florida before that. And Steve Adazio comes in as an offensive line coach. I think it's a combination of all of those, the talent that comes back, the experience, I think, more than anything that comes back, but also that off-season excitement of a number one recruiting class. And then, that ability of, hey, you knocked off number one and you also knocked off a ranked Auburn team. The question is, can you now do it again, but do it on the road in the Southeastern Conference?
Andrew, a lot of questions answered. You pointed out a lot of the main storylines. Outside of quarterback, obviously when somebody's around the program, they always have a little bit more insight or maybe a bit deeper understanding of sort of the questions that the team is facing. Everybody's talking about A&M in the quarterback spot. What are maybe they not talking about in terms of questions heading into the season?
I think one of the questions is going to be the offensive line, bringing back Bryce Foster at center, Ruben Fatheree at that right tackle, two guys who were thrust in as freshmen because of injuries, and Layden Robinson will be on that right side. Look, Kenyon Green's going to be a tough guy to replace. I know you can put a body there, but I don't know if you can put that versatility of Kenyon Green, and really happy that he is with the tackles. And then also the guard, but also the left tackle. I think the left side has to be something that has to be solidified. Trey Zune is someone who got hurt massive at 6'5". He may find himself at that left tackle position. Jordan Moko, an Australian, could find himself at left guard, but Aki Agumbi. And then you guys mentioned, I'm with you. I think it's hard to be a freshman and play. I think you can play in those first couple of games, but then with Miami and the SEC, I think the speed of those games and the strength every single time. You know what? I'm really jazzed about this defense. I love the defensive line, and I've said this before, and Bobby Brown got a little mad at me because Bobby thought he was sexy. Defensive tackle is the most unsexy position in football. Don't you think? In that you never talk about it, but I don't think you win without great defensive tackle play. And McKinley Jackson is healthy, and Isaiah Rake played in a number of important snaps last year. It's not like he just came in at end of game. He was in the crux of games. Now, you do have to replace DeMarvin Leal, and you do have to replace Michael Clemens, and that's not going to be easy. But I think when you have those stalwarts, and you guys know that front four can help your back seven.
Oh, yeah.
So excited at linebacker with Edgerrin Cooper and Andre White Jr. And then that back end, I think Miles Jones coming back for his 6th year. I think Damani Richardson at safety helps anchor a defense that really – one of the reasons why Jimbo plays the offense he does, that pro style, so the defense doesn't have to be on the field that often, but Lord knows he's got some game breakers. He's joked in the past, I wouldn't mind a one-play 75-yard drive every once in a while, for that defense. But in the past, that defense was on for so many plays. I think this style of offense plays in, and I think it's going to be an attacking defense that Mike Elko had done in his 4 years, and DJ Durkin will take over.
Speaking of defensive linemen, we know what they look like in good ones because of what Baylor has with the former LSU player in Siaka Ika, Jackson player, and among the depth they have at defensive tackle. When I asked Dave Aranda this, Andrew, last season, you hear about the defensive lines, the athletes and whatever of the SEC, and he mentioned that the defensive linemen recruited by most in the SEC are just good. They're just really, really talented, physically gifted, and they just let them go. They just go get the ball. And in the Big 12, you may have some of those guys, but it's more scheme-oriented. That was very intriguing what he said. But in the SEC, just let the guys go. Just turn them loose, snap the ball, let's go.
Jimbo Fisher has always said, "You win in the SEC with the guys with the hands in the dirt," and those are your two linemen. And Dave Aranda is absolutely correct, and he knows that. For all that we talked about LSU's offense in their national championship year, the defense was also very, very stout. I mean, it was, you talk about complete. And it's funny, we'll play doing a coaching show with Jimbo, and in a couple of years in the past, and I know Mike Leach is there at Mississippi State, but Jimbo's always said, go back to even Jackie Sherrill and Joe Lee Dunn, right, at Mississippi State. Those defensive linemen for Mississippi State really were a problem for you. And just a couple of years ago, Jeremy Sweat was drafted by Washington, but they had two others who were drafted there, and Kentucky's success and under Mark Stoops is those lines. Yeah, it gets underrated. When I work with a partner like Dave Elmendorf, who is a safety here and with the LA Rams, and yes, he played with the fearsome foursome, but he says that front four does so much for everybody else on that defense. I've got to agree with Dave Aranda. He's absolutely right. And if he gets an SEC-type defensive line in the Big 12, I think it's something you could absolutely disrupt a whole bunch of offenses.
Andrew, thank you very much. Appreciate your knowledge. Andrew Monaco, again, voice of A&M, with us on the Aggies. We've discussed those top